This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
I've known for months that they've been in touch with Peter's agent. Peter's agent and the Eagles, they met at the Combine, so this is nothing new here. But what I don't have an answer for, and no one seems to have an answer for, is why have they not shut the door on Peters? That's the first thing. And number two, if Peters does resign, well, then who's starting? I mean, everyone wants to pencil Peters in because he said if he comes back, he'll be starting. That's fine. Are they going to have an open competition, or are they just going to hand it to Peters?
That was May 21st on the Sports Bash. Football at 4 NFL insider Adam Kaplan. Months ago here on 97.3, we've told you for months now about the conversations between the Eagles and Jason Peters. We've been talking about it for months about what has been going on. They've stayed in touch. And Adam Kaplan asked on May 21st, the question is, why have they stayed in touch? Well, now we know. Jason Peters has re-signed with the Eagles. And we now know Jason Peters is the pull in case of emergency lever on the Eagles offensive line. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. The warm-up. We got a lot to get into. Only 1 hour to do it. Text board is open for you. 609-403-0973. Jason Peters is back. And according to multiple reports, he's back to play guard, not left tackle. So we're going to get into that. Plus Ben Golliver, national NBA writer. He is down in the bubble. We're going to go down inside the NBA campus bubble with Ben Golliver coming up at 125. Talk some NBA, talk some Sixers, and more. Ben Simmons spoke this morning. We'll touch on what he had to say to the media as well. And as I mentioned, text board is open, 609-403-0973. For those who may or may not have heard, here are the details. Jason Peters is signing a one-year contract worth up to $6 million with $3 million in guarantees per source. So that means he has $3 million in guaranteed money. Another $3 million he can make up as well during the year. According to Adam Schefter, Jason Peters wants to play till he's 40 years old. Well, at least for 2020, if everything goes as planned, he'll be playing right guard, looks like, for the Eagles. And I think it's a very interesting place to start because we had a lot of discussion here on 97.3 ESPN about Jason Peters playing guard. Let's first start with the obvious. We all know that a major reason why Jason Peters is coming back is because of familiarity. The Eagles know him. The Eagles understand him. And the Eagles have stayed in touch with him. You just heard the clip from Adam Kaplan, NFL insider. Football at 4 on the Sports Bash back in May. Said the Eagles had first started talking to Peters back at the draft combine. They've stayed in touch with him since. And then June 18th, that was the week that Brandon Brooks tore his Achilles, Adam Kaplan was asked again about the possibility of Jason Peters now that Brandon Brooks is injured again.
The Eagles, by the way, have not cut off communication with his agent, and Scott, clearly they've had interest in bringing him back. He has an interest in coming back, but Jason is looking for a certain type of job and ability to make a decent amount of money, and that certainly is part of the reason why he's not back.
He's looking for a certain kind of job. He's looking for a certain kind of money. So you have to assume that the Eagles are bringing Peters back with the intention of playing him starting on the offensive line. Now, I don't want to get hyper nuanced, okay? I'm not trying to nitpick any reports, all right? But the original Adam Schefter tweet says that Peters is coming back to play guard. It doesn't say right guard. So until the Eagles confirm otherwise, I think it's fair to say that there's a possibility that Peters plays left or right guard. And the reason why I want to bring that up as well is because think about this. If one of the concerns you have with Peters is that he played all those years on the left side of the line, and you're concerned about moving him from playing left to right, did the Eagles maybe talk to Jeff Stoutland and ask him, can Sayamalu move from left guard to right guard and we stick Peters at left guard? I think a lot of us are assuming he's going to right guard, but what about the possibility of that? And I immediately thought of that because back in June, Eagle All-Pro tackle Trey Thomas was on the Sports Bash. And they asked him about Jason Peters playing at guard. And this is what Thomas, who played a long time in the NFL, high-level offensive lineman, this is what he said about putting Jason Peters at right guard.
No. It's because he's been in a left-handed stance for, 15 years now? So just to say, all right, hey, we're going to just switch you over to the other side, and, you're not going to be playing where you used to be playing. We're going to put you out put you down here in guard. That's a totally different situation.
Now, we'll get into the details of what Trey Thomas said about playing at guard in a bit, but I want to put that little thought in your mind because I noticed when Adam Schefter reported, he said that he's going to play guard. He didn't initially say left guard or right guard. He didn't pigeonhole it in a position. Now, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reported that the Eagles were signing Peters to play right guard. Now, the problem with that is, remember, over the last couple of years, Mr. Rap Sheet has gotten a couple Eagles reports wrong. So until I see somebody else specifically point to right guard or the Eagles say right guard, I don't think there's a coincidence maybe that Schefter only reported playing guard initially. He didn't say right guard. So keep that in the back of your mind as well. As Trey Thomas said, it's asking a lot of a guy to move from the left side of the line to the right side of the line. That's my first thought coming off of that. My second thought is this. I remember Jason Peters telling the media previously that he would be open to playing other positions. He has said before, numerous times to the media, if the Eagles ask me to play another position, I'm willing to play it. And NFL insider Adam Kaplan on Football Forum, the Sports Bash, specifically addressed that point about Jason Peters.
I know for a couple years the Eagles had discussed internally maybe would they consider moving him to guard or get him cross-trained. As far as I understand it, he never took cross-training snaps in practice.
He never took the cross-training snaps, but the Eagles have discussed it internally. They did talk about him playing different positions, including guard. So we know that Peters was open to it. We know the Eagles have discussed it. So really, when the news came down this morning from multiple media outlets, Adam Schefter, NFL Network, that Peters was returning to the Eagles to play guard, maybe we should have seen it coming. Because like I said, here on 97.3 ESPN, there's been a trail set up. There's been a path built for Peters to return. And I think the combination of Peters' willingness to play another position, parlayed with the Eagles and him already discussing the idea of him playing other positions that are not left tackle, have a lot to do with the bringing him back. This wasn't just a brash decision. This wasn't just one of those things where, oh, well, we're just going to bring him back for the heck of it. No, this has been a groundwork laid for months now, the potential of this. And not just months, you could even argue years. You only look back years of all the times Peter's offered to play other positions. The Eagles' discussions have been playing other positions. This is not new. So that's why when I saw the reports come in around 9-something this morning, I was like, all right. I see what's going on here. All right. I kind of had an idea this was coming along down the pipe. Because again, if you've been listening to us here on 97.3 ESPN, we've been keeping you informed. Text board is open. 609-403-0973. By the way, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com, every day at 4 o'clock on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. The other thing I immediately thought of this morning as I was making my way in, I thought about this. If Jason Peters is coming back to play guard, doesn't that mean that the Eagles have more confidence in Dillard at left tackle than whoever's playing guard right now? So, for example, the presumption has been based on different reports, based on what Doug Peterson has said, that Matt Pryor is going to get an opportunity to play right guard. That was the assumption all along. Well, if you're bringing Peters back to play guard, doesn't that specifically say that the Eagles are indirectly telling you we have more confidence in Dillard at left tackle than Matt Pryor at right guard if you're bringing Peters in to play right guard? I think that this is indirectly a vote of confidence in Dillard. We've all been talking for weeks about, is Dillard the right guy? Should Dillard be starting at left tackle? You didn't draft this guy, you just had him sit on the bench. He played well at certain points at left tackle. He struggled at right tackle. We've gone through chapter and verse for months now about the Andre Dillard situation. I think the Eagles getting Peters to bring him to play guard is a vote of confidence for Dillard, because they're telling you we didn't bring this future Hall of Famer in to take the job from Dillard. We're bringing this guy in to shore up a part of the line that we have concerns about. And that is extremely fascinating, because we heard Doug Peterson say, we have confidence in Dillard. We have a ton of confidence in Dillard, right? That was the original quote from Doug Peterson. Well, if you have a ton of confidence in Dillard, then I think it's fair to assume that your confidence in Dillard has been proven out by you explicitly coming to the forefront and saying, we're bringing back Jason Peters to play guard. So if anybody wondered how much confidence do the Eagles really have, if the Eagles are 100% serious, and I'll admit it, I was one of the people who questioned it. I thought it was a little bit hyperbole. I thought it was a little bit excessive that the Eagles were turning around and pumping up Dillard the way they were. Maybe they were serious. And I think bringing back Jason Peters to play guard says that specifically as well. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Again, this morning, Jason Peters signed to play guard. It is a 1-year deal, $3 million guaranteed, a contract worth up to $6 million. And I'm going to assume, without any further information, that $3 million is probably some sort of games started, starting bonuses, roster bonus, games played kind of deal. We know, for example, another Eagles player, Marquise Goodwin. Marquise Goodwin, if he plays for the Eagles this year, he is contracted, according to reports, to get paid $500,000 per game he is on the active roster. So is there maybe a similar clause built into Peter's contract that says that $3 million that you could make on top of your guaranteed money, that's for how many games you actually play at right guard? It's a possibility. It's a way to work around any salary cap questions. It's a way to keep some flexibility. It's a way to, maybe, for lack of a better term, incentivize Peters to say, hey, man, you want to come back and start? Well, we're going to pay you to be a starter. We're not paying you to just be here to mentor all the other guys. So we're all going to keep an eye on this whole Jason Peters Eagles situation. Again, football at 4 every day on 97.3 ESPN. Sports Bash has been telling you about the Jason Peters situation for months now, and now he's officially back. And I know Mike Gill and Hunter Birdie will have more to talk about it coming up on the Sports Bash. Also in the news today is Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons spoke to the media this morning, and we're going to dig deeper into Ben Simmons coming up with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post, national NBA writer. He is in the bubble, so we'll be touching on with him about the NBA bubble and about specifics about the Sixers as well. But I thought it was interesting, one of the things that Ben Simmons said this morning. Because, when you have these opportunities to talk to these guys, you're trying to get specific answers. And one of the questions he was asked about was about the position switch. This idea that he's now at the 4, as Brett Brown calls it, or moving down to a point forward, as some of us like to describe it. And the one quote that stood out to me the most was this specific one. And I want to keep this in the back of your mind when we talk to Ben Golliver coming up in about 10 minutes from now. Ben Simmons said, quote, "I'm a basketball player. At the end of the day, if you know me, you know if you put me on the floor, I'll make anything happen, whether it's plays, buckets, stops. I'll guard anyone 1 through 5. I run the floor. I can get to the rim. I can score the ball, and I make plays happen. So wherever you put me, if I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to happen," unquote. That sounds like a guy who just wants to play basketball. That doesn't sound like an individual who is out there trying to nitpick about his job, his position. All the complaining people have had about Ben Simmons over the years. For him to make that kind of statement tells me that this is not a selfish individual. This is not a guy who's out there, trying to pull his team down or hold them back. He's committed to his craft, and he's also confident in what he can do. Let's be realistic. There's only a handful of players in the league that can guard players 1 through 5. And Ben Simmons is affirmatively one of them. There is no question that Ben Simmons would be able to hold his own against a guy like Rudy Gobert. There's no question in my mind that Ben Simmons can hold his own against the majority of the perimeter players in this league. And realistically, the only players that you can name right now that Ben Simmons might have problems with, let's be realistic, the whole league would have problems with those guys. Because I know there's some dude driving around right now, well, Ben Simmons can't guard James Harden. And what, you can? Yeah, give me the long list of dudes who are guarding and stopping James Harden. I'll wait, because I know it's such a long list. I'm kidding, by the way. I think that for Ben Simmons to say that this morning tells you directly that he is going to do whatever it takes for the best of the team. And he's going to do what's needed of him to put the team in the best position to be successful. There are a lot of times that we do not appreciate when players are unselfish. We do not appreciate when guys tell you that they're willing to do whatever it takes. I like the term, I'm a basketball player. Frankly, I wish more athletes had the attitude that Ben Simmons has. The attitude of, hey, man, I'm going to have an impact on the game no matter what. Put me out there, coach. I'm ready to play. You know what? I think that's great. And there's a lot of Ben Simmons haters out there, but if this guy is that bought in to whatever he has to do to be successful, I think it's about time that we buy into Ben Simmons as a growing basketball player, as a growing human being, and getting better. Let's be realistic. Ben Simmons is nowhere near his prime yet, and that should scare a lot of teams around the NBA. Let's grab a couple texts before we get out of here for the first break. We got Ben Golliver again joining us about 5 minutes from now. 609-403-0973. Tom from the Villas chimes in and says, I think this signing of Jason Peters is purely off of sentiment. That's from Tom the Villas. Well, Tom, here's the thing I would disagree with the sentiment point. You don't sign a guy to play a position as important as guard if you don't already envision him to play the position. As I said earlier, Adam Kaplan talked about it. The Eagles have had the discussion before. Jason Peters has told the media, if they need me to play another position on the line, I'm willing to do it. So this isn't a new thing. I think, yes, there is an element of familiarity. If you want to say that part of this signing is familiarity, I will give you that, Tom in the Villas. But I don't think it's purely off of sentiment. I think that's a little unfair to characterize it that way. I think that's a little nearsighted. I think you got to look at the fact that Jason Peters, his willingness to play a different position, and the Eagles' willingness to say we think he actually can play that position is a big deal. 609-403-0973. One more text in here before we hit the break. Dan from EHT gives a different perspective on Jason Peters. He says, I like the Peters signing. Good price range for a Hall of Fame player to be a teacher and then some. That's from Dan and EHT. You know, I think the teacher part is very important because Lane Johnson and other players are talking about the fact of how the impact Peters has had on them and their playing ability. So you have to think that another year of Peters in that locker room mentoring the other offensive linemen, you're only going to gain and benefit from that. That is something that is very, very important when it comes to a locker room. Because remember, how many times have we heard, well, what are the Eagles going to do with Malcolm Jenkins in the locker room? Here comes Jason Peters. You don't think dudes respect Jason Peters? Jason Peters gets up in the middle of the room, tells everybody to shut up and listen to me. I think everyone's going to shut up and listen to Jason Peters. Let's be realistic here. Who's the dude in the Eagles locker room who's going to be like, I ain't listening to Jason Peters? There's nobody. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Coming up next, Ben Golliver, national NBA writer, Washington Post. NBA bubble, Sixers, Ben Simmons. We're going to open up the NBA bubble and let you in next here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Welcome back into the warm-up. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll go back to your text messages in just a bit, 609-403-0973. But joining us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, live from the NBA bubble, national NBA writer for the Washington Post. Also, co-host of the Open Floor NBA Show podcast as well. And he joins us now, as I said, on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Ben Golliver is back on the show. Ben, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So I was listening into what you guys were talking about on the podcast and, reading what you've been putting out there, and you're starting the quarantine. You are literally on the ground with the NBA campus. So what has your experience been like so far?
Well, we checked in on Sunday night and immediately entered basically a 7-day in-room quarantine period. Now, that's a longer period than the players went through because I was not tested for coronavirus before I got here, and because I had to fly commercial. I flew Delta from L.A. To Orlando to get here for the NBA's restart. So that's why they put me through a 7-day quarantine. They're testing me every single night. I've already passed my first 2 tests, which is good news. I'm very proud about that. And we're all counting down really until next week when scrimmages will start. The teams are already practicing. So I can see players every once in a while out my window kind of milling around the Disney property. But for right now, I'm trapped inside. and just counting the days down until they free me.
Now, I'm curious, Malika Andrews of ESPN, she's already gone through the quarantine you're going through, and she's talked about on multiple platforms about the fact that, the first couple times you go through the test, you're a little nervous. And she said once you pass a couple tests, the nerves start kind of easing. So did you go through a similar situation?
Yeah, first of all, I heard that the tests were kind of painful. The nice part was these are just the shallow tests, so it actually is not that uncomfortable. And they're just taking a swab from, your nose. It's almost like they're picking your nose, and then they're getting a swab from your tonsils. So it wasn't too bad. I've been very, very careful throughout the quarantine period. I've very strictly isolated myself from others when I was at home. When I flew across the country, I had a face shield and a mask, and I was wearing rubber gloves on the plane. And so I think that my exposure risk to the disease has been very minimal all the way along. So I wasn't necessarily concerned that I was going to test positive. But, just like any other test, if you get it back and the results are good, it's going to build your confidence up. And so I'm feeling confident and in a good place with that.
What is your perspective so far on the accommodations? We know that there were a lot of questions for a lot of people going into the environment. So what is your perspective on the setup? Guys like John Morant, he's like, hey, man, we're here to play basketball. I'm not worried about the accommodations. While other guys like Patrick Beverley, they're like, hey, man, I played in Europe. This is not that big a deal.
Right. No, I'm with John Morant. I'm not a silver spoon guy. I'm used to, being in a lot of Courtyard Marriott hotels, throughout my career. So, the hotel room, it's got 2 double beds. It looks like a typical kind of family vacation hotel room. I've got a nice long desk, a big flat screen television, a little bathtub and shower combination in the bathroom. So I've got everything that I need personally. The Wi-Fi works. They're bringing me 3 meals a day. I think, I'm a vegetarian, so that makes it a little bit harder to eat. A couple of the meals, it's been a little heavy on the meat, but, besides that, I really have no complaints. I mean, to me, I look back and just think, we've been doing nothing for 4 months, and I was still working hard and trying to chase stories and do all of that from home, but it's not the same as being kind of where the action is. So just to have the opportunity to be out here and potentially covering scrimmages as early as next week and, games 2 weeks from now, it's phenomenal opportunity. I'm really excited. Seeing Zion and then LeBron and Kawhi potentially on opening night, July 30th, my blood's already getting going. I'm getting pretty juiced about it.
Now, the last time you and I discussed, one of the things we talked about was if, the NBA gets this bubble started, are they doing enough? So with the testing that you've experienced and everything that do you believe the NBA is doing enough now that you are on the ground to say that, listen, they're doing everything possible to make this safe and make this work?
Well, it seems like it. I think that, my experience has been limited because, I'm still trapped in this room. But from, the organization of the onboarding process, arriving here, they had everything laid out. The test professionals are really, on their P's and Q's. They know what they're doing. We've got daily monitoring where we're filling out questionnaires. We're getting our pulse checked. We're getting our temperature checked every single day. So that part is very thorough. And they gave us a device that'll start beeping if we get too close to other people. It's kind of meant to ensure social distance when you're actually walking around on campus. So they've taken a lot of really smart steps, in my opinion. And ultimately, they're going to be judged by the test results, though. And they released on Monday that there had been 2 people who tested positive, when they were here in Orlando, but both people were, kind of identified as positive before they were able to interact with their teammates. So that's really important. At this point, the bubble is holding up just fine. The one part that's really impressed me is how quickly the test results come back. My first test result took less than 15 hours to come back. It's a huge question around the country. People are waiting days and days for their test results. Even some Major League Baseball players were waiting like 3 or 4 days to get the results back. And that's where it gets dangerous, because if you have a player who gets tested on Sunday and he goes and plays with his teammates Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, doesn't get the result until Thursday, he could infect the entire team during that time period. And the NBA's testing system is quite rapid, quick, and I think that's going to help them, keep this thing pretty safe.
Ben Golliver joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Ben Golliver. Also, check out the podcast. I was listening to it on my way in this morning, the Open Floor NBA show with Ben Golliver, the co-host. Ben, let's talk about some of the teams. Obviously, you're excited about actually getting some eyeballs on the players. So let's talk about some of these teams. 22 teams in this bubble, but you do have some interesting situations. Russell Westbrook isn't there yet. The Nets basically have a mash unit going on down with Jack Vaughn, the interim coach. So what is the storyline that stands out most to you so far?
Well, I think it's going to be an ultimate test of a couple things. First of all, camaraderie and culture, right? If your players are on the same page, if they like each other, that's going to be a huge advantage, right? If you have internal team conflicts, those are going to come out because you have to spend basically all day and all night with your teammates here on this campus. There's no real way to kind of go your separate ways after a tough loss, right? So that's going to be number one. I think the other real test obviously is going to be which teams are deep. Who's got their full complement of players. Like you mentioned, there's some teams already that have had guys go home early. That's going to come out over the course of a playoff series. If you don't have enough guys to go, you're going to feel that. So a team like the Lakers that comes in as an early favorite, they're already down Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo. I mean, that's a tough hit for a rotation, especially when you're looking at the Clippers, who are so deep and loaded up at the trade deadline with Joakim Noah and Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson. I mean, they really got some reinforcements there, so that could be a factor to watch. The other thing I'm looking for is just, if you're an underdog team and you don't have any home court advantage, do you wind up rolling over in a playoff series? If you get down 2-0, you don't get to go back to your home gym to try to mount your comeback effort in a series, right? You're just here still stuck in Orlando, not playing in front of any fans, maybe thinking about your wife or your girlfriend and your kids back at home and starting to think, hey, maybe it's checkout time, right? So I think when we get to the playoffs, I'm going to be looking, are we seeing shorter series rather than longer series? Are there teams that are just trying to get on the next plane out of here? That's going to be something to watch.
You mentioned about the home court away situations. Well, one of the teams that definitely falls into that category of curiosity is the Sixers. This is the team that won the majority of their games at home. They only won 10 on the road. And I think one of the things that stood out to a lot of people recently is the conversations about Ben Simmons. It looks like he's going to play the point forward, and Brett Brown has spoken glowingly about him. So what are your thoughts about Ben Simmons basically, in many ways, changing positions?
Well, to me, I think it's crazy. The guy's a point guard, and he's an all-star level player. He's established. I mean, to me, I look around the league, the best teams build their rosters and their rotations around their best players. And I understand the need to get more spacing and more shooting into that lineup and try to move him around. But that guy wants to have the ball in his hands. He's a future, star number one pick we've had in the NBA draft. I just don't get it. I see the arguments for it, but to me, it does not seem like a long-term solution. He's a franchise-level player. He should be playing on his terms. You see, whether it's the Lakers or the Rockets or the Bucks, those very best organizations always start with their premier playmaker and build around them. So I don't know what that means for his future in Philadelphia or what it says about his partnership with Joel Embiid and everything else. To me, it's just a strange move. And, certainly I commend him for going along with it. And we'll see how well it lasts. I mean, to me, it really raises my eyebrows.
Yeah, you said you commend him about going along with it. One of the quotes he said, Ben Simmons himself did this morning, he said, listen, I'm a basketball player. I can impact the game from anywhere on the court. And he affirmatively said, listen, I can guard anyone, they're 1 through 5. So, as you mentioned, you have to compliment the guy on the fact that he's like, look, I'm here to play basketball. So it has to give a compliment to him and say, listen, this guy is willing to do whatever the team needs.
Yeah, and at the same time, we'll see how it plays out on the court, right? Because there's a difference between, saying the right thing and then having it play out that way on the court. I mean, to me, again, the very best players always want the ball in their hands. I mean, that's just a fundamental aspect of basketball. 5 guys on the court, 1 basketball. And with a guy like Simmons, with his speed with the ball, with his dribbling ability, with his vision, his passing touch, that's a guy you want to have, as a centerpiece, a fulcrum of your offensive attack. That's not a guy you want to be stashing, in the dunker spot or somewhere else off ball or screen setting or any of that stuff. Like, sure, he can do those things, and his versatility on the defensive end is absolutely commendable, and I'm glad he pointed that out. But I don't get it, man. He is so talented with the ball. I think it's a result of some of their other fit issues with their roster. And, to me, they're a team to watch, not only with Brett Brown's future, but with that partnership between Embiid and Simmons and with the entire roster, because they're so expensive with so many big contracts. If they don't make a deep run here in Orlando, they're going to have some serious, serious questions.
Before we get to Brett, you mentioned about the rest of the team. What about this team? Because if they're going to go out there with a Shake Milton, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid lineup, is that a lineup that is able to match up with all the top teams in the Eastern Conference?
Well, on paper, for sure. I mean, we all got excited about the Sixers on paper. I thought they were going to make the Eastern Conference Finals before the season started. They made the necessary investments to get, quality five-man lineups, and it just really hasn't played out during the regular season. To me, they were one of the biggest disappointments in the entire league. The fit questions were there. Embiid's consistency was there. His health was obviously a question, too. So I do think that the good part is that they come into Orlando, at least as far as we know, in good shape, good physical shape, and good health from a health standpoint, because Simmons was missing time previously, and now he's back. So those are all positive indicators. But to me, they're a cut below the other teams in the Eastern Conference right now. I mean, I have Milwaukee way ahead of them, Boston and Toronto ahead of them for sure. I would put Philly kind of in a similar class with Miami. Given the players who may or may not play for Indiana with Oladipo's status in question and a few other issues there, I would put them above the Pacers. But, right now, Philly just has a lot to prove.
Yeah, you mentioned Brett Brown earlier with a lot to prove. He definitely goes in that category, but the report came out recently that there might be NBA teams that may be not as interested in firing their coaches because of the fact that teams might not want to pay the guy who was fired and the new coach. So could Brett Brown maybe fall into that category of, well, it might be a good idea to get a new guy, but do we really want to pay the old guy and the new guy in this pandemic environment?
No, it's a great point. I think it's going to drive, some free agency decisions this summer too, right? I mean, guys who have options are probably going to be picking them up so they can get whatever money that's possible. True free agents are going to have a hard time finding the typical market value this offseason because of the major financial hit that's going to trickle down through the collective bargaining agreement. So I could absolutely see a situation where we don't get nearly as much player movement as we expect. We don't get nearly as many, big dollar player contracts as we expect. And some teams talk themselves into just kind of sticking going forward with their coaches or their front office staff just because of the expense involved in changing. I think it's a completely legitimate takeaway and prediction. And part of the reason why is we don't know what next season is going to look like. We don't know if they're going to be playing that one in a bubble. We don't know for sure that it's going to start in December. We don't know how many games it's going to be. They clearly want to finish it up before the Olympics start, but we have no truly set time frame. I think a lot of those questions are going to be answered by how well the bubble holds up, down here in Orlando. So I think all those kinds of uncertainties does favor people who are incumbents. It winds up giving them a little bit of a boost of job security for sure.
Ben Golliver joining us here on 97.3 ESPN, national NBA writer, Washington Post. Ben, a couple more before I let you go, and I really appreciate the time. Flipping it over to Western Conference, that whole bunch of teams near the bottom that are competing for that final seed, the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, the Blazers. Is there a team of that group that you're kind of zeroing in on, being like, let me tell you something, I want to see how this team does, because if they make it in, watch out?
Well, I mean, it's not even a team. It's one guy, Zion Williamson. I mean, this guy, it's amazing. He just turned 20, but he was 19 years old when the entire NBA decided, look, we've got to come back from a pandemic. We have to put our best foot forward. Who are we going to put on opening night before the Lakers versus the Clippers? And they decided Zion Williamson. How many 19-year-old kids in the history of the NBA have been that important to the league's success? I mean, you could say LeBron. Maybe you could say Magic Johnson when he was Finals MVP at that young of an age. But, I mean, not very many guys have been in that kind of conversation. So for him, the hype factor, he delivered on it during the regular season. I can't wait to see what he looks like, with all the work he's put into his body over the last couple months. And he's just got a great infectious attitude as well. And I think, the positivity part is really important, getting along with your teammates, being a fun guy to hang out with. That's a critical part of leadership. And I think in this kind of environment, it will be very helpful for a young team like the Pelicans. But they're by no means, going to waltz into this playoff. It's going to be a dogfight between the Grizzlies with John Morant, who's put on some weight. We know Damian Lillard's, here to win. I mean, he's made that very clear over the last couple of months. And even the Sacramento Kings, I think people overlook them. De'Aaron Fox is a special player too. I mean, not quite an all-star this year because of some injury issues, but he looked like a rising all-star, a future all-star at times for Sacramento. So it's going to be a great race. I think it's one of the best storylines to track over the first couple of weeks of basketball's return is how does that thing shake out?
And you led me right into my final question for you. You mentioned about John Morant putting on some muscle. Ben Simmons is the guy who obviously looks like he put on some muscle. I think one of the things I overlooked is, and I want to know your perspective on it, one storyline to me is there's been 4 months since the last time the NBA played, and the 4 months is usually an NBA offseason. So how many 2.0 versions of players do you think we're going to see, and how could that impact everything we're going to see as the games play out?
Oh, a lot, for sure, because keep in mind, this layoff has actually been longer than a typical offseason because they've been off since March, right? So you got to almost treat it like it's a brand new training camp. Now, all the teams are the same, so that part's a little bit weird. But, for younger players, guys who are 19, 20, 21, 22, we should expect all those guys to make some sort of a leap, during that time off. And if they don't, it probably means they weren't as productive as they should be. Some guys who I'm looking at, whether it's Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, that type of player should be taking a step forward as they head into the playoffs. And then the younger players, guys who've never been in the playoffs before, whether it's Zion, Ja, De'Aaron Fox, or even a Luka Doncic, all those guys should be looking to kind of get on a center stage for the first time and send a message about who they are as players.
He's Ben Golliver. Follow him on Twitter at Ben Golliver, covering the NBA inside the bubble. He's on the ground. He's in the place. Make sure you follow him for all your NBA news, and also check out his podcast. He's the co-host of the Open Floor NBA Show podcast, and he joined us as all guests right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Ben, appreciate the time and insights.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure, man. Take care.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Back to your text messages next, 609-403-0973. We've talked Jason Peters. We've talked Ben Simmons. Now we're going to hear from you next here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hennig back here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to the text board just a moment, 609-403-0973. I want to remind you, 97.3 ESPN has been teaming up with Seize the Deal, and this week, Seize the Deal. Ooh, let me tell you, this might be my favorite one yet. You can get a $50 gift card, right? $50. The Dickey's Barbecue Pit in EHT for half the price. Yeah, Dickey's Barbecue Pit, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Let me tell you something. Their food is awesome. I've eaten from this place multiple times personally. Everything on the menu is great. If you don't take advantage of this deal this Friday at 9 a.m., at seizethedeal.com for Dickey's Barbecue Pit, $50 gift card for half the price. My friend, you just don't like food. I'm sorry, I'm just being real with you. This food is incredible from Dickey's. So you got to get in on this deal this Friday. This Seize the Deal this week. $50 gift card, half the price. Dickey's Barbecue Pit in Egg Harbor Township. For more information, just tap on the 97.3 ESPN app. Let's hit these texts. 609-403-0973. Texter chimes in and says, I'm okay with the Peters signing. The price is right for someone who did a lot of good for the franchise. I feel like bringing him back as a guard is irrelevant. If one of the tackles go down, he'll be plugged in there right away. Well, I don't think he'll be plugged in there right away. And here's why. I think the Eagles would prefer to keep as much continuity as humanly possible on the line. That has been a consistent element of the team for a while. Remember, when Jason Peters went down in 2017, they didn't move Lane Johnson from right tackle to left tackle. They put Vaitai in, and they won the Super Bowl. So you have to think about, do the Eagles really want to go moving guys all around? It's not their style. I think it's more likely that the Eagles try to make sure that someone else, whether it's Mailata, whether it's a guy who's already on the roster, whether it's a guy they bring in the camp, maybe a little bit later someone gets injured. I think that might be more likely. Now, if someone gets injured in camp, let's say Dillard or Lane, God forbid, knock on wood or whatever you do, if one of those guys gets injured out for the year, then maybe I see Peters moving a tackle. But if we're like week 3, week 6, week 8, and Lane or Dillard go down with an injury, I don't think he's getting plugged in there right away. I think they're going to have somebody else lined up just based on their history. Another text, 609-403-0973. Dan from EHC is not happy with Ben Golliver. Dan from EHC says, Golliver is crazy. Sixers are a lock to win the chip. This is the move that should have happened earlier when Shake balled out. This was the original idea with Fultz being drafted. Ben will play the Greek Freak LeBron role. That's from Dan and EHT. Well, first of all, I don't think Golliver is crazy. I think Ben's point is that he doesn't want the Sixers to take the ball out of Simmons' hands just because he's playing the 4. That was Ben's bigger point. He wants Ben to still handle the ball the majority of the time because Ben is an all-star point guard. And I don't think he's crazy for saying that. Listen, if you watch the Bucks, if you watch the Lakers, LeBron is the primary ball handler. And it's been Rondo, Avery Bradley, all the other guys as the secondary ball handler. In Milwaukee, Giannis does handle the ball a lot, but he still has Bledsoe and George Hill over there. It's okay to have another guard on the court who's a high-level player, and I think that you're right. Yes, this was the original idea with Fultz, but just because Ben is, someone like Golliver says, listen, I want Ben to handle the ball more than Shake Milton, I don't think that's crazy. I think that's just saying, listen, I think Golliver trusts Ben Simmons with the ball than Shake Milton. That's all. Also, I don't know if the Sixers are a lock to win the NBA championship. Let's be realistic. We don't know what version of the Sixers we're getting in the playoffs. We getting the home court Sixers. We getting the away team Sixers. We getting the Sixers team that plays up to their potential. Or we getting the Sixers team when Joel Embiid gets the stomach virus. We getting the Sixers team with someone getting injured for the 200th time. We don't know.